So we recently got some new leaks on the cards that are going to be in the upcoming selection box, and one of them is this card, Super Star Slayer Typhon Sky Crisis, which is a card that's really popular both in TCG and Master Duel. Like, a lot of people play it, but at the same time, some people think it's really good, some people think it's really bad. So today, let's have a little discussion on what, at least what I think this card will do in duelings and whether or not you should get it. So let's begin by my experience with Typhon. So I've been playing the TCG for quite some time already, and I have a copy of Typhon since its release, and I've played it in many of my decks. So I have some experience with it in the TCG. I played it since release on Master Duel as well, so I'm really familiar with that card. And also, I have an MP5 copy of Typhon on FGOJP, as you can see on screen right now. So let's have a look at Typhon's effects. Typhon, if you're not familiar with this card, can be made with 2 level 12 monsters, but nobody does that. You always make this card after the turn your opponent summons 2 or more monsters from the extra deck. So it's really easy to fulfill this condition, because once your opponent summons 2 monsters from the extra deck, you can use any monster you control as long as it is the highest attack monster on your field. Any single monster can turn into this card. This card has 2900 attack and defense, so it's pretty big. Not as big as Blue Eyes, but still pretty big. But when you make this card using that effect, you cannot normal or special summon monsters for the rest of this turn. Pay attention to it saying a normal or special summon. This will come up. While this exceeds summon the monster is on the field, another player can activate the effects of monsters with 3000 or more attack. This is a continuous floodgate. It stops activated effects, it does not stop continuous effects, and also it affects monsters everywhere, not just on the field. And also, once per turn, you can detach one material from this card, return a monster from the field to the hand. This effect does not target. That's one of the strongest points that this card has. So let's have a look at why Typhon is sometimes regarded as not a very good card. People like to call this card Plan L, because usually you make this card at the very end of your turn when you go second, and usually when you make this card you lose anyway, so the win rate of this card is abysmal. It's really low. Usually when people make this card they still lose, and people aren't using it wrong. That's like kinda an incorrect way to label it. People aren't really using it wrong, they're just using it in a situation where whether you have it or not does not matter. And the reason why this card is has such a low win rate whenever you make it is, well, because it can only be made using a monster on your field, and then it locks you from summoning anything else for the rest of the turn. So you make it, and then if this guy gets destroyed or negated or whatever, you cannot do anything else. You're literally locked out of doing literally anything, and you need to end your turn, and then next turn you'll just lose. And even if you do make this card and it sticks on the field, and then you're able to use its effect, bounce a monster, and then attack, if you don't immediately win with this card, you cut yourself off of pretty much any follow-up, because once you make this card, you cannot do anything else. So if you make this card, you get rid of your opponent's stuff, and then if you can't OTK and then you pass this card, it can be dealt with pretty easily, because it doesn't really have any form of protection other than the floodgate that it has. And also, it's kind of sometimes finicky to use just because of its requirement that it needs to use the highest attack monster on the field. And usually the situation where people make this card is they try to do their combo going second, it gets interrupted, they can't really win, and then this is like the last thing that they can possibly do. So they aren't really using it wrong, it's just like that's the only thing left they could do, and 99% of the time, if it comes to that, they cannot win with this card anyway. So with that said, let's have a look at when this card is actually useful, because, well, there is a reason so many people still choose to play a single copy of this card in their extra deck. Well, other than the fact that it's, you know, if you have a slot in your extra deck, it doesn't really hurt to play this card in the 1% chance that it can win you the game, but it does have actually more merits than you might think if you already know about this card. It is a pretty good board breaker because of the fact that it doesn't target and it doesn't destroy, so it can pretty much get rid of anything and bypass most forms of protection, such as the one that Dragoon has. It cannot be targeted, it cannot be destroyed by card effects, but Typhon can bypass both of these kinds of protection. Also, this card is really good in trap-heavy decks because this card can be your main game plan when you go second. Trap-heavy decks usually are pretty bad going second because the traps need to wait a turn before they can use it. But in the case of Typhon, that's actually a merit because you can make this card going second, try to force out interruptions or break your opponent's board. Even if you can't get rid of every single interruption, maybe at least you can force out something. And then what you can do is set traps and then just use the traps during your opponent's turn, because even though you can't summon anything after you make Typhon, you can still set traps, set free traps, and then just wait for your opponent's turn and then use those traps. So that restriction doesn't really matter too much. And also, this card is also pretty decent in TCG or Master Duel in decks that use a lot of hand traps. We're talking about like more than 50% of your deck is hand traps. In those decks, sometimes you just draw a handful of hand traps and no engine. And in that case, if you go second, you can at least make this card and then sit on the hand traps that you drew. So even though this card cannot win games on its own, it can still be a threat. Even though it's not that big of a threat, it's still a threat, and it can potentially win you the game if you have hand traps backing this card up that you have in your hand. So in those situations, this card is pretty useful. And also, it's just good as a game ender, because sometimes in some decks they have a lot of monsters that they can spam, but they don't really have a good line for an OTK. They maybe don't have enough interruption, removal to get rid of monsters before they attack, or the monsters just don't have a lot of attack. Let's say like Yummy in TCG. They have a lot of monsters, but they don't really have that much attack. And Typhon can be pretty useful in that case, because you can just turn any of their monsters into discard at the very end of their combo when they're already setting up their board, and then you can use the bounce, and then you can go to battle, and then that's an extra bounce on top of all of your other monsters, and that can help you win the game. It can help you OTK in games that you otherwise couldn't. So let's talk about the state of Duel Links right now, because we have to understand what the state of Duel Links is before we talk about how good Typhon is probably going to be. So, Duel Links is not a trap-heavy meta. It has passed this point a long time ago. Back then, like when we're talking like 2021, 2022, there's still a lot of people playing a lot of traps. We're talking like the limit-free traps, Compulse, Crackdown, those sort of stuff. Back then, traps are a lot more impactful, and people still play a lot of traps, and that is no longer the case right now. Nobody plays traps. They all play quick play spells like Eclipse or Droplet, because those cards are good both going first or second. And also, the game has become a lot more skill-centric, so every skill designed in the modern day has basically two effects. First is to most of the time boost the consistency. It like searches a card and maybe does something else. And then the second effect is when your opponent controls a monster, or if they have like a card in their graveyard or field, you can do the bonus effect where a lot of the times you maybe summon a monster for free from your deck face down, or maybe add a bonus card to your hand, maybe set a spell trap that can be activated that turn. Depends on the skill, but generally the skills do that. And also there are some monsters in the meta that are like targets for Typhon. So like Mirror Jade is everywhere because of Branded being tier 1, and also Dragoon is going to be in the campaign, the free campaign. Basically everybody gets a copy of this card for free, I think. And I don't know how good that deck will be, but it's probably going to end up somewhere. So those cards will be basically fodder for Typhon to counter. So let's talk about what I think Typhon's position will be in Duel Links. So first of all, skill restrictions don't really lock Typhon because most skills, the vast majority of skills, lock you from the main deck and hand, but not the extra deck. So they usually lock you into an archetype, except from the extra deck. And Typhon belongs to the extra deck. So unlike stuff like Nibiru, you don't really have to worry about a skill working with this card or not, because you can just use it in everything. Next is that Typhon doesn't stop skill summons or flip summons, because if you remember from the skill description, Typhon stops normal or special summons after you make that card. It does not stop skill summons, because skill summons just bypass everything. That's how skills work. And it also, even though the skill summons the monster face down, you can still flip that monster face up, because flip summons are they are not under the restriction of Typhon. So what Typhon will end up being good at is what I think likely going to be useful as a breaker when you combine it with a free monster from your skill, and then that can be a way for you to OTK. Maybe you do part of the combo and it gets stopped. And then you go, okay, that's fine. I'll make a Typhon using whatever's left on the field, and then I bounce back your opponent's monster, and then you can use your skill, if you haven't already, to summon a monster from the deck just for more damage, because Typhon only has 29. And if you summon another monster from the deck, it's pretty easy to get over 4k, and it's a lot harder in Master Duel TCG to OTK with Typhon just because they have 8,000 life points, but in Duel Links we only have 4,000. So Typhon plus pretty much any other monster is OTK most of the time. So Typhon can be used for that. Or if you're already winning, you can just use it for an extra monster removal before you attack full game. So let's say you're playing Live Twins. So Live Twin, if you're not familiar, they don't really have a lot of attack power, other than making their Link 4, which has 3,300 attack, and then using its quick effect to split into two 1,100 attack monsters, and then attacking with those. So that's usually lethal, but if your opponent has a monster on the field after you already used the pop from Leela, you will basically have to attack your opponent's monster with your Sunny Snitch, and then split your Sunny Snitch into the 2 Link 2s, and then you attack with the 2 Link 2s. And a lot of the times that is not lethal, because if your opponent has a monster with 1,500 or more attack, more than 1,500 attack, or if it's just in defense position, you can't really deal enough damage with attacking with Sunny Snitch and then splitting it with its quick effect. In that scenario, you can, instead of making the Sunny Snitch, you can just leave the 2 Link 2s on the field, and then use one of them to make Typhon, and Typhon has 2,900 attack. One of them has 1,100. Both of them have 1,100 attack, so you can use either one to make Typhon and use the other one on the field for damage, and then that's exactly 4k. That's exactly 4,000 damage, and then you can also use Typhon's effect to bounce whatever's left on your opponent's side of the field back to the hand to make sure that your opponent doesn't have any monsters to block your attacks. So in those situations, it can be very good, and of course, trap decks like Eldritch will definitely use this card a lot, and probably as their one of their main win conditions as well, because of how well it synergizes with decks like Eldritch that can wait a turn before they summon stuff from their back row. So, final words of this video: should you get Typhon? I think it's pretty decent, even though some people might think that it's way too situational. I think it's actually probably better than you might think. It's not really a game changer a lot of the times, but it is a lot more useful than some people might just get the impression from, because of how, you know, the really low win rate of it being in a Master Duel and the TCG. So I would always consider playing one copy if you can, because obviously there's no downside to that. If you have one extra deck space, you can just play a Typhon. If it comes up, it's good. If it doesn't, it still doesn't really hurt. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I wouldn't really spend too much to try to get it, but if you have it, that's cool. If you don't, that's also fine. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.